By the time I even entered high school, I had accepted as fact that 8 years down the road, after college, when I started my career, I would be getting paid less than my male counterparts simply because I was a woman. And this was because starting in about sixth grade, my teachers had begun teaching me about what the wage gap was, and we'd had discussions about it. And when you're in sixth grade, you accept everything your teacher says as fact because you're naive and you don't think to question it. And it wasn't until my senior year of high school that I began to think about, what my teachers were telling me and question everything. And, it's that stage where you sort of grow as a person and question authority and question what you're told. And that was when I began to look at the wage gap and began to see sort of what it really was. And that was a huge moment in my life. I remember when I was first learning about it and I realized, this isn't true. And I realized how influential this subject can be on a mind of a young girl. That we're telling them at such a young age, the world isn't going to see you as equal. You deserve to be, but the world isn't going to see you as that. And when I reached my senior year of high school, I realized that no, the world is going to see me as this, but people are going to tell me constantly that the world doesn't see me as equal, but the world does. Not the world, but the America that we live in, that we're blessed to live in, where equal pay has been law for 51 years now, over half a century. It has been illegal to discriminate pay based on gender. And, and that was a huge moment for me to learn, how influential one little thing can be on a mindset. I had accepted it as truth, and and since then I had seen the world sort of as a twisted place where it would pay me less simply because I was a woman. And even if I was just as qualified, if not more qualified than a man, they would not see me like that because, America is still a land of oppression and male superiority all the time and everywhere and all of that. And it was so empowering to learn it wasn't true. And this was when I was really questioning my alliance with the feminist movement. And this was what broke my last straw. People have asked me all the time, why did you stop calling yourself a feminist? And it was many things. It was a tumultuous time, getting through that. But the wage gap kicked it. It was the final straw where I said, like, enough is enough. This constant rhetoric by the movement that the world is out to get you, that America has these ceilings on women, that they're trying to hold you back. And it hit me that it really wasn't true. And I'll make another video later on about how much I of all my problems that I have with the feminist movement. But this is I say it's the most important because it was that thing that when I realized it opened my eyes up to the true mentality and the true hurt that the feminist movement is actually bringing to a lot of girls, without even knowing it. I think while they're still trying to preach equality, they're actually and trying to preach for women to get better and to succeed more. They're really damaging, which I don't think they realize they're doing, and so. This is a subject I am extremely passionate about. I talk about it a lot, especially with the November elections coming up, with who I think we all assume is going to be the Democratic nomination in 2016. The war on women rhetoric is already extremely loud, and the wage gap is just as loud, and I only assume it's going to get louder and louder and louder. And I think anyone who actually knows the truth about the wage gap, it's our responsibility to start spreading this, because it is extremely important with the female demographic. The wage gap is going to win votes. Not that I think Hillary has any capability as president to do anything to fix it. It doesn't need fixing. She can't do anything to fix it. The wage gap. The wage gap is preached by feminists to be the shining example of how we don't live in an equal society yet. That we still live in a society where women are still oppressed by male superiors. And it's actually the complete opposite. we live in an America where the wage gap, which does exist to some extent, we'll get into it, exists as the result of women having the freedom to make their own choices. I cannot be oppressed and make choices. Okay? In order to be oppressed, I don't have that ability. The wage gap exists as a direct result of women having freedom and women having their own voice and having their own power to make decisions for their own lives. And I think it's used all the time as this example from feminists, like, oh, women not equal, but you know what? We're equal and we're free, and though it's looked at as some awful thing that's going on, it's actually incredibly powerful, in a good way, because we have the freedom to make our own choices, which we haven't had before. So we'll get into the wage gap now that I've ranted about everything under the sun. But I think, and I am very passionate about this subject. I think a lot of people know that, and this is going to be a very passionate video, because it is so important to me. So let's get started. So for those of you who don't know, the wage gap is taking the average rate of pay of men working 35 hours a week and women working 35 hours a week and compares them. This isn't broken down at all, just people working over 35 hours a week compared based on gender. That's it. And the average, I think, that is being preached is like women are paid 23 cents less than a man. So it's like for every dollar a man makes, a woman makes 77 cents, which is a load of baloney, but we'll pretend. So I did say that the wage gap exists, which it does, but it is not the result of discrimination, which is where I have the problem with it. The wage gap, according to the White House study, which all my studies that I talk about through this video are linked below. I also have a corresponding blog post which I wrote a few months ago, which is going to be linked below. Everyone I talk about is going to be mentioned below. So if I just point down here, it'll be somewhere. I'll try and put it in order, but probably not going to happen. So that's that. So, according to the U.S. Bureau of Labor and Statistics, men work the 10 most dangerous jobs. And for those of you who don't know, dangerous jobs pay more because they're dangerous and you're risking life and limb every time you go to work. That's just logical that you would get paid more for that. Men also dominate the higher paying computer and engineering fields, which have low female working numbers and employment numbers, I should say. But women tend to dominate the lower paying service industry jobs where, like food industries, like healthcare, but not like high up healthcare. Like, there's like 2 tiers of healthcare. Like, I'm going into nursing, which is like the lower one, and lab techs and nursing assistants and like there's like tier, like I'm not like talking about like surgeons in this, but like the lower tier, and so that is and that's not showing that women are getting discriminated against. I mean, even just looking at that, it's just women tend to choose lower paying jobs. Women tend to choose jobs that make them feel more fulfilled, that are safer jobs, that have more flexible hours, closer proximity to home, whereas men, put more of a focus on profits and their paycheck, and they don't care what they're doing at work as long as that paycheck is coming in. And that's speaking sort of on a general scale, but and that studies below as well. And but as a whole, women tend to want to do a job that makes them feel good at the end of the day, that they can leave and say, like, I've done good work, I enjoyed that work, I've done good. Whereas men are like, well, whatever, as long as I'm getting the paycheck. And so women are willing to take a chunk out for that sense of fulfillment. That sense of fulfillment is worth the pay that they're not getting. Whereas men typically will work anything, and they don't care if it fulfills them. They want that extra money. And this is obviously speaking in general terms, but that's what this study, which is down below, has found. I think that's very important, especially when you look at business owners. Now, business owners are in charge of their own salaries for the most part, based on profitability. And even looking at business owners, women get paid less than their male business owners, because women put more of a focus when they open their business on proximity to home, fulfillment, safety, all of that, whereas men, again, focus on the profitability. These are just two separate mindsets that, on average, are just held differently by the two genders. Obviously, there are differences. There are different people like in each category, obviously, that outliers and whatever. Those obviously exist. We're talking about averages. The wage gap is all about averages. So we'll talk about it in average terms. So that's not showing discrimination. It's just showing that, we just generally as two genders just don't put the same focuses as our primary focus. So other differences that would result in a wage gap: women tend to take time off from their careers, whereas men don't. So that's, yes, for motherhood, to take care of sick relatives, or even just to take a break from their careers as a whole. Women are far more likely to do that than their male counterparts are. So even if mirror image of people, same qualifications, same job, same hours, same everything, start working at a company, get paid the exact same amount, work for a few years, getting their annual raises. 5 years down the road, she takes some time off. She's going to take 3 years off to go care for her sick aunt. And he still works, and he works another 3 years, getting an annual raise each year. Even if she comes back in at the same level and the same pay grade, which isn't typical because you've taken years off. Typically, people who take years off take a few steps down to get back into the game. But say she does come back in at the same pay grade, the same job and everything, he's already 3 annual raises above her, resulting in a wage gap, even though when they started they were getting paid the same amount. Makes sense? I mean, that's sort of common sense. Other factors: men typically men on average work 15% more a week than women do. So, even though people will say, oh, it's a full-time salaried job, yes, it's a salaried job, but if your days are only 35 hours a week compared to people who are typically working 60 hours a week, you're going to have different salaries. And yes, there is a giant discrepancy in the wage gap based on hours worked. Men far more likely to work more than 45 hours a week. Women I don't want to say hardly ever, but in very few percentages work over 45 hours a week, and very few work 60 hours a week, where it's far more typical for men too. And if you're working more, you're doing more for your company, you should be getting paid more. I mean, logic. Men are far more likely to travel with their job, which pays more. Men are far more likely to work jobs that people as a whole don't want to work. Just disgusting jobs, which typically pay more. Men are far more likely to work nights, weekends, and holidays, which as all working people know, pay more. Women typically don't want to work that much. Women typically want shorter days and to work less. Far more women work 35 hours a week than work 45. Fact. So that's pretty much all when it comes down to picking your job. There's other factors, but those are pretty much the main ones that contribute to the wage gap. Now, if the wage gap is my most passionate subject to talk about, this is my most passionate subject within the wage gap to talk about. If you preach about the wage gap and you never talk about how important it is to negotiate your salaries, I will never listen to you. I will literally tune you out with any subject ever. You do not have a voice anymore. Because if you're preaching about the wage gap enough that you caught my attention, because a lot of people talk to me about the wage gap. If you bug me about it enough that I start up a conversation with you and you never in that conversation bring up negotiating, then I'm going to assume you do not know what you're talking about. That you haven't actually looked into the wage gap enough to see how influential negotiating is in the wage gap, and I'm going to assume you don't know much. That's just the truth of it. If you preach about the wage gap and you don't and you don't talk about how important it is to negotiate, you are not fixing the problem. You are whining about it. And I refuse to deal with whiners. If you're going to whine about a subject, you're not fixing it. In order to fix the wage gap, a huge chunk of that is talking about negotiating salaries. 57% of men negotiate their salaries compared to only 7% of women. On average, a person who negotiates their salary raises their salary 7%. That is astronomical, especially over a career, compounded year after year on annual raises. I mean, that we're talking about a lot of money and fixing the wage gap. And people aren't taught how to negotiate. Women aren't taught to negotiate. I don't want to say it's not in our nature because women have a lot of different personalities, but I think among the women I've talked to, it's not in our nature to. And I might get attacked by people for saying that. But, we're not taught to negotiate our salaries right now, men or women, but, for some reason, men are more likely to negotiate. And be that as it may, and we can whine about that all we want, that men are more likely to, and what it's the result of, and whatever, and I'm sure feminists are all going to whine about it, and I don't really care, and go ahead and say what you want, but at the end of the day, women aren't negotiating, and instead of whining about it, let's make a change. Most of the people that I interact with are in late high school, college age. Now, this is how easy it is to do this. I'm assuming most of you have friends. I hope so. If not, feel free to send me a message and we can be friends. And get, 5 of your friends, 10 of your friends to email your dean of students and tell them that, you want to put on a seminar, you want to bring someone in that will teach students how to negotiate their salaries. Talk about it. Link them to the articles that I'm going to link below on how important it is to teach people how to negotiate and how influential that is in your career. College and high school are supposed to be getting you ready for your career. And this is such an enormous part of that, and how can they not teach this? But they're not right now. And you know what? Instead of whining that they're not, make the effort. It's going to take no time. You know how easy it is for them to bring in a speaker, and they're always looking for new ideas to bring speakers in. And how many times have we listened to the same types of speakers? This is something that isn't being taught. And your colleges are going to love that you're bringing an idea to the table, because they sit in meetings all the time and don't know who to bring in. And, if you've got students, telling them, this is what we want to learn how to negotiate our salaries and how to do it properly, they're going to bring someone in, and it'll be a 2-3 hour seminar. They might put on 2 a semester, and it will you will make ridiculous amounts of money extra in your lifetime because of this. And it's so easy, get 5 of your friends, 10 of your friends, whatever, all of your friends, email me and I will email your dean for you, and talk about how important this is. This is a huge step to fixing the wage gap that exists, and this is something you can actually do. Too often I hear feminists saying it's a societal change, it'll be slow moving. This doesn't have to be slow moving. This is something you can do to help not only yourself, but 10, 15, 20, however many people show up to this seminar, 300 girls and guys, help them in their lives. And it takes 10 emails to your dean saying, found this really cool person online who talks about, how to negotiate salaries. Can we bring him in? Or bring her in to, talk to the college. Why aren't you doing this? Why isn't this being told? Why isn't this being taught by the feminist movement? Why isn't something actually tangible that could change something being taught? And it's so frustrating. So, you need, if you're talking about the wage gap, talk about negotiating. it will change lives. Like, I can't stress it, that 7% on a salary is a lot. Say you're making $100,000 a year, which is great because I just want to do easy math because I'm doing it off the top of my head. But it's also sort of a study that was done in Margaret A. Neal, I think. Oh gosh, yeah, it was Margaret A. Neal's book, Women Don't Ask, and she did a whole study on this. And if you haven't read that book, read that book. It's so good. It's all about negotiating and how powerful that is, and why women don't ask, and to negotiate their salaries and all of that, and read that because it's really good. But this is, so she said, like if you're making $100,000, like that's great. But what if your counterpart, male or female, decides to negotiate their salary and they make 7% more than you? They're making $107,000 your first year, and you might say, well, it's only $7,000, but down your career path, and if you work for however many years, she says, like whatever, that's when you start, and then you get to retirement. She said that's an extra 8 years you'd have to work to reach the same amount of money when you retire than your counterpart did, all because she negotiated or he negotiated their salary and you didn't. Like, this changes lives. And oh, it's so frustrating when you can do something so amazing, and I just don't see enough people talking about it. So hopefully this might inspire a lot of you to go and talk to your deans in September or now. They're planning out their speakers for the fall, and email them now and be like, I've got this great idea for a seminar. It'll be an amazing thing, and it's gonna change lives. Like, I'm not even overreacting right now because it will. Do it, and seriously do it. Yeah, like, okay, now that I've talked about that enough, if you have any questions about how to go about, I guess, asking your dean or whatever, or speakers that you want to know possibly for ideas for bringing in, feel free to email me, and I can send you back some ideas of speakers that I love that talk about this subject, and we can talk. So I think that's pretty much the wage gap as a whole. I mean, I could probably go on for quite a lot longer, but I won't bore you. It's already been 22 minutes of me freaking out about the wage gap. So if you have any more questions, feel free to send me them. Let me call my dog. Duke! Come here! Come here, puppy! You want to say hi to everyone? He's becoming a regular visitor on the Kate Show. Come on! No, come on. Duke, you gotta say hi. Come on. Come on. You're, okay. Come on. He's so unhappy. Duke, come on. Why aren't you? Come on. Well, thanks for watching, learning about the wage gap with us. If you have any questions, send me them on Twitter or comment below, and I will try and answer them. Also, my Ask, I think, is linked up somewhere. You can find that, and you can ask anonymously if you're ashamed. Also, you can send me an email if you have any more questions. My email is linked. We'll try and make more videos soon. We made 2 this week, so it's a lot for us. Didn't make any for a month, and he's down. He's down for the count. Okay. And have a lovely day, and God bless everyone. And let's take back the rhetoric from the war on women. There's no war on us. Okay, bye.